You're standing in your driveway with the key in your hand, and the truck won't even click. Not crank, not sputter, click. The dashboard lights that used to flicker on the second you touch the ignition are just gone, dead glass. And somewhere behind that dashboard is a little gray box, about the size of a deck of cards, that decided your $50,000 truck isn't going anywhere today. That box is called an ECU, an engine control unit. It's the tiny computer that tells your engine when to fire, how much fuel to use, when to shift. Almost every car built since the late 1970s has one. And here's the part that should bother you. That same little computer chip is the single most likely thing to get fried by a strong enough burst of electromagnetic energy, the kind that can come from a solar storm, or, in a worst-case scenario, a high-altitude nuclear detonation designed to do exactly that. Replacing one ECU, today, out of pocket, no insurance angle to work, that's commonly $800 to $2,000 for the part alone. More on some newer trucks, before labor. And if something knocked out every unshielded ECU in a 100-mile radius at once, there wouldn't be 2,000 replacement units sitting on a shelf waiting for you. There'd be a waiting list with your name somewhere near the bottom. This isn't a doomsday video. I'm not selling you a bunker. I want to show you two things that are both completely real, both cheap, and both almost nobody talks about anymore. How to actually shield a spare set of electronics so they survive a serious electromagnetic event, and why some of the oldest, simplest cars on the road, the ones built before any of this computer stuff existed, are already naturally protected, just by being old-fashioned. Stick with me, because the last item on this list is the one most preparedness channels get completely backwards, and it's the cheapest fix of the entire video. An electromagnetic pulse is a very fast, very intense burst of energy that induces electrical current in anything that conducts electricity: wires, circuit boards, metal frames. Think of it like a sudden, enormous version of the static shock you get touching a doorknob, except it happens in every wire and chip within range, all at once, for a fraction of a second. Two things determine whether that pulse fries something: how big and complex the electronics are, and whether there's metal shielding standing between the electronics and the pulse. Simple circuits with short wires can often survive a pulse that would destroy a computer with long internal wiring and dense microchips. Length of wire acts like an antenna, and the more antenna you have, the more energy you collect. That's the whole game. A modern car is basically a rolling nest of antennas. The ECU, the wiring harness, the infotainment system, the anti-lock brake computer, sometimes a dozen smaller modules for windows, mirrors, airbags. A car from 1974 has one job for its electrical system to do: make the spark and turn the starter. And it does it with a distributor, a coil, and a set of contact points. No chip, nothing to fry. Here's the number that should stick with you. NASA and utility industry researchers have studied what a Carrington Event level solar storm, the kind that hit Earth in 1859 and knocked out telegraph systems, would do if it happened today. The widely cited estimate for a severe geomagnetic storm's damage to the U.S. power grid and connected infrastructure runs into the hundreds of billions of dollars, with recovery in the hardest hit regions potentially taking months, not days. That's not a fringe number. That's from grid reliability studies and government preparedness reports going back over a decade. You don't need the worst-case scenario to feel the smaller version of this problem. A regional grid failure lasting even a few days after a major storm or attack would leave gas pumps down, ATMs down, and, this is the part that matters for this video, a lot of newer vehicles either damaged or simply unable to get fuel, parts, or a working shop to fix them. This isn't a conspiracy. Nobody buried this knowledge on purpose. It's simpler and, honestly, sadder than that. It's just not profitable to teach people how to protect a 15-year-old alternator with an Army surplus ammo can. Auto manufacturers make money selling new ECUs and new cars. Preparedness content that gets clicks tends to be about food and water, not ignition coils. So this stuff sits in the same place as a lot of practical mechanical knowledge, in old repair manuals, ham radio forums, and the memory of people who grew up fixing their own cars before check engine lights existed. I got interested in this after spending time around Amish and Old Order Mennonite communities in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and Holmes County, Ohio, where a lot of families still run horse and buggy transportation, but also maintain diesel equipment, generators, and for hired drivers, older trucks. Specifically because parts are cheap, engines are simple, and nothing on the vehicle needs a laptop to diagnose. I sat in a workshop outside Berlin, Ohio, watching a mechanic gap a set of contact points by eye, with a feeler gauge and 40 years of practice, on a truck that had no computer anywhere on it. That's not nostalgia. That's a genuinely different, genuinely more resilient way of keeping a vehicle running, and almost nobody under 50 has ever seen it done. Here's what you can do this week, most of it for well under $100 total. 1. Build a basic Faraday cage for spare parts, roughly $15 to $40. A Faraday cage is just a fully enclosed metal container that blocks outside electrical fields from reaching what's inside, the same principle that keeps you safe from lightning inside a metal car. A galvanized steel trash can with a tight-fitting lid works. So does a surplus military ammo can, which already has a rubber gasket seal. The key detail almost everyone gets wrong. The container has to be continuously conductive metal with no gaps, and whatever's inside can't touch the metal walls, or the energy can jump straight to it. Line the inside with cardboard or foam first. This isn't theoretical. The US military has used Faraday shielded containers for sensitive electronics since at least the Cold War, and it's standard practice in electromagnetic compatibility testing labs today. 2. Store a spare ECU or ignition module inside it. $80 to $250 depending on your vehicle. If your only vehicle is a modern one, a shielded spare control module is your insurance policy. You can often find a used or reconditioned unit for your exact make and model through a salvage yard or auto parts supplier. Keep it double-bagged in anti-static wrap, inside the metal container, in a dry spot. This one part, sealed and shielded, is the difference between a dead truck and a truck that's running again in an afternoon. 3. Keep a basic spare ignition coil and set of points for any older vehicle you own, $20 to $60. If you have access to an older vehicle, even a second car, a farm truck, a tractor, these are cheap, small, and shield easily. A points and coil ignition system has almost no delicate electronics to damage in the first place, but the coil itself has enough wire coiled inside it that a very close, very strong pulse could still weaken it. Keeping a spare costs less than a tank of gas. 4. Disconnect and store portable electronics before a known solar event. Free. This one costs nothing but attention. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Space Weather Prediction Center publishes real-time alerts when a significant solar flare or coronal mass ejection is heading toward Earth, usually with 1 to 3 days of warning before it arrives. If you get that warning, unplugging portable chargers, spare radios, and backup electronics and setting them inside your shielded container for that window is free protection during the exact hours it matters most. 5. Learn where your vehicle's most vulnerable wiring runs. Free, 20 minutes with your owner's manual. Longer wire runs, especially ones routed near the outside of the vehicle body rather than tucked deep in the frame, act like bigger antennas. You're not rewiring your car. You're just learning, for your specific vehicle, where the engine control unit lives and how exposed its main wiring harness is, so you know exactly what a shielded spare needs to replace. 6. Get a basic multimeter and learn to test a dead ECU before you assume the whole car is junk. $15 to $25. A lot of people assume any electrical failure after a power event means a totaled vehicle. Sometimes it's a blown fuse, a corroded ground strap, or a single relay. All things a $15 multimeter in 20 minutes can rule out before you spend $2,000 you don't need to spend. 7. If you're shopping for a backup vehicle, look specifically at pre-1975 models with points ignition or newer diesels with mechanical injection. Price varies, but a running project vehicle can often be found for $2,000 to $6,000. This is the one that surprises people. You don't need a horse and buggy to get this benefit. Mechanical diesel engines, the kind used in a lot of pre-1990s farm and construction equipment, and in some classic pickups, control fuel injection with a mechanical pump, not a computer, meaning there's genuinely nothing for a pulse to damage in the fuel delivery system. Pair that with an alternator you can bypass for a generator if needed, and you have a vehicle that keeps running through exactly the kind of event that strands everyone around you. I know what some of you are thinking. You live in an apartment, you don't have a garage, a barn, or a driveway to work in, and you sure don't own a spare truck to convert. This still applies to you, maybe more than anyone. A galvanized trash can fits in a closet. A spare shielded phone, a battery-powered radio, and a set of backup chargers take up less space than a shoebox, and they're the things you'd actually need first, to call for help, get news, or coordinate with family, long before you're worried about a vehicle at all. The vehicle-specific steps matter most if you own a car. The shielding principle behind Step 1 protects anything with a circuit board, and that's useful no matter where you live. Early on, I told you the best item on this list was coming at the end, and here it is. Your car radio, or a cheap secondhand one, can become your best source of outside information after a grid-down event. but only if you protect it now and know how to use it properly. Because most people get this backwards. A basic battery-powered AM/FM radio, stored, shielded, and disconnected, isn't just for entertainment. Emergency alert systems, including NOAA weather radio and the National Emergency Alert System, are built to broadcast on frequencies a simple radio can pick up with no cell signal, no internet, and no satellite required, running on nothing but AA batteries for weeks. The mistake people make is buying an expensive multi-band radio, leaving it plugged in or sitting loose in a drawer, and assuming it'll survive along with everything else. A $20 radio, sealed in your shielded container with a spare set of batteries stored separately, will very likely still work when almost everything else around you doesn't. And that radio is how you'll actually learn what happened, how bad it is, and how long it's expected to last, instead of guessing. In the summer of 1859, a British astronomer named Richard Carrington was sketching sunspots through a telescope in his private observatory when he watched, in real time, an enormous solar flare erupt off the surface of the sun. He had no way to know it yet, but he'd just witnessed the beginning of the largest geomagnetic storm in recorded history. 17 hours later, the charged particles from that flare hit Earth's magnetic field, and telegraph systems across Europe and North America went haywire. Operators reported sparks jumping from their equipment. Some machines kept transmitting even after being disconnected from their batteries, powered entirely by the current the storm induced in the wires themselves. In a few documented cases, telegraph paper caught fire. Carrington didn't build anything to survive that storm. Nobody could have. The technology to shield against it barely existed. But the operators who fared best that night were, almost by accident, the ones running the simplest equipment, with the shortest wire runs and the fewest delicate parts to overload. The lesson wasn't really about telegraphs, it was about complexity. The more intricate the system, the more places it has to break. That's just as true of your car's wiring harness in 2026 as it was of a copper telegraph line in 1859. And it's the same reason a scientist with a notebook figured out something 160 years ago that most of us have quietly forgotten. Simple things survive what complicated things don't. None of this is really about EMPs specifically. It's about not being one single fried circuit board away from being stranded. Every dollar you spend chasing the newest, most connected version of everything is a dollar spent making yourself more dependent on a system staying online, staying stable, staying exactly the way it is right now. A shielded spare part costs less than one tank of gas and buys you something a warranty never will: the ability to fix your own problem, on your own timeline, without waiting on a supply chain or a service department to decide when you get to go back to work. That's not fear, that's just having options nobody can take away from you. Tell me in the comments which of these 7 you're doing first: the shielded spare parts, the backup radio, or if you're one of the people who already owns an older points ignition vehicle and didn't even realize it was protection until right now. I'd genuinely like to know what you're driving. If you'd rather trust your own judgment than someone else's headline, you're exactly who this channel is for. Hit subscribe and you'll be part of the group that actually checks how things work instead of just being told. Next video, I'm heading back to a working farm outside Millersburg, Ohio, to show you how a family there keeps a 100-year-old hand-crank well pump fully operational without a single moving electrical part, and why it can outlast every submersible pump on the market by decades.